Hello, and welcome to our webinar series, Rethinking Manufacturing, which is brought to you by BDO Australia and the Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre, or AMGC. So my name is Ryan Pollett, and I'm BDO's National Manufacturing and Wholesale Leader. And if you've missed our previous webinars, they've been recorded, so you can catch up with them whenever you get a chance, and they're available on our website. So my team are just going to add some links into the chat now for your convenience, so you can see where those are available to download. And before we kick things off, I just want to quickly draw your attention to a couple of housekeeping matters. So we're just going to put a slide up now. To start with, just to make sure that you're all aware, everyone's automatically muted. We will be accepting questions throughout the session, so those could be submitted using the question tab on your screen. We'll try and get to as many of the questions as possible. However, if we can't respond to your question, we'll be sure to follow up with you after the webinar concludes. We'll be asking you questions with a poll today as well, so do make sure when the poll questions come up on screen that you answer those as we go through, and we'll be going through the results of the polls live once we've asked the questions and got the results. So we're not using slides today for the presentation, as those that have attended the previous ones will know. It's more of a discussion format between us. However, for the couple of slides that we have put together, they are available for you in the handouts tab if you'd like to access those. If you do experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please click the support button, which is the one on one of the bottom tabs on the screen there. And finally, just letting you know, the session is being recorded, so all registrants will receive a follow-up email afterwards containing the slides, a link to the recording, and access to register for future sessions, and the speaker contact details for each of us. Okay, so now to get into today's topic. So today we're discussing how to succeed locally and globally in manufacturing. So over the last few months, we've seen a resurgence in manufacturing within Australia, especially in regional areas, as manufacturers work on shortening their supply chains, become less reliant on a single trade partner, and pivot to answer critical needs in the market. The pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in our supply chains and also our ability to thrive in niche manufacturing for broader markets. With this resurgence, we are seeing deeper discussion and interest in reshoring or nearshoring manufacturing in Australia. But does it make sense to do this? With growing geopolitical tensions across the globe, a rise in protectionist policy does seem to be the trend. However, for the Australian market, a look back at history shows us that from World War II right up until the 70s and 80s, protectionist tariffs hurt the Australian economy and resulted in decreased innovation. There's no escaping the fact that Australian manufacturing needs overseas markets to survive, but the question remains, what manufacturing capabilities do we need to ensure self-sufficiency in the market, and where can we grow and be competitive globally? So today we're going to be exploring these topics, including onshoring and offshoring, the critical intersection of policy, and how manufacturers can compete in a global market. So we've assembled a great panel for this discussion today, and with me is Michael Sharpe. Welcome, Michael. Michael's the National Director of Industry at the AMGC, and if you've watched our previous webinars, you'll already be familiar with Michael. He's joined us for each of those already. For those who are new, Michael joined AMGC in 2017 and has a key role engaging with industry across Australia. This includes linking partnerships among the country's manufacturers and research facilities, which is vital for creating high-value jobs and products through collaborative projects. Also joining us today is Bill Cole. Welcome, Bill. Bill's an international trade partner at BDO. So Bill is an international trade expert with a history of delivering successful outcomes for business in the international trade sphere. Skilled in all aspects of transnational commerce, Bill has particularly strong skills in the analysis of border regulation as it affects business models and cost outcomes. And finally, also joining us today is David Fechner. Hi, David. How are you? David's a corporate finance partner with BDO. So David's knowledge across business value drivers means he approaches clients from an informed perspective, providing insight from the outset. David provides support to fast growth businesses, including advising on valuations, mergers, and acquisitions. So welcome to the panel. Okay, so time to get into a few questions, I think, for everyone on the line. So Michael, if I can, I'll kick things off with you again. So I just wanted to talk a bit about AMGC's vision to make Australia competitive globally in manufacturing. Where do you see Australia being strongest in terms of bringing innovations to the market?
Oh, thanks, Ryan. Hey, good to catch up with you again. The first one of these we did, I was out in Moree in regional New South Wales, and then a couple of weeks ago we were talking, and I was coming to you from Toowoomba and Dalby in Queensland, which was great to get up there and see what's happening on the ground. And today I'm coming to you from an industrial park at Morisset, just near Newcastle. So great to get out and talk to our great manufacturers, business owners, and local leaders of industry to get a feel for what's happening on the ground. And certainly there's a lot of resilience going on out there. It's planning for the future, taking each day as it comes, and very much people talking to their suppliers and even their suppliers' suppliers to make sure they have continuity of everything that they need. So there's some great discussions going on, and pleased to say a lot of collaboration happening and people supporting each other, which is really important. The future for manufacturing for Australia is certainly around the export opportunities. We are a trading nation, and we always will be a trading nation. So we need to have those strong relationships for suppliers, but also for our marketplace to get our world's best products out to. So reshoring, we're going to hear a lot about that, and good to be talking about those sort of initiatives today. Certainly, there's never been a time like we've had before for looking at bringing manufacturing back onto Australian soil. And we're talking with companies pretty much every day at the moment about how can we help them to look at that. It's a two-pronged approach about robotics and automation to make it as innovative as possible and improve the quality of the products through automation and smart sensing and other things like that. So we're able to connect our membership, which is growing right across the nation, and connect experts in their field. For example, like the New South Wales Smart Sensing Network, or the robotics hub in Queensland, which is really hitting their strides. So there's some great people in the field out there that can offer assistance, and business leaders too, who like never before are willing to put up their hand and say, how can we help? Just connect us, we're happy to talk. So I think there's a great opportunity around there. We spoke last time around defence and that massive defence budget that we have now. So companies should be looking at how they can diversify, but also shore up and be strong about what they're doing at the moment. And I'm pleased to say that those conversations are happening, and it's always great to be out on the factory floor and hearing it firsthand.
Thanks, Michael. And I mean, you mentioned defence there as being one area that there's an opportunity for Australian manufacturers at the moment. Are there any others that you're seeing as strong subsectors that we could be focused on?
Yeah, think about medtech. I mean, of course, because of the crisis, we had to bring people together to make the ventilators. But we brought 30 separate manufacturing companies together to build 2,000 ventilators, which are coming off the assembly line right now. Thankfully, they're going to the medical stockpile. But now we have created this supply chain and making this world-class product, a very complex piece of equipment, high value, and certainly the high skills to go into putting that all together. But here's an opportunity now that we can continue manufacturing those and export those ventilators to the world. So there's opportunities around that. Certainly the space agency now and the supply chains that we need to build here locally. There's a great opportunity in defence and now with space. As signatories to the NASA Moon to Mars mission, I'm working with the space agency and the CSIRO at the moment around building and shoring up local supply chains for companies to get involved with space. And so if people out there today want to get involved with that, or they've got some questions around how could they look at using the space industry as part of their manufacturing platform, I'm happy to take those calls, happy for people to reach out to us at AMGC, and we can offer some guidance and connections as well.
Thank you. And yeah, I suppose I just want to touch on a little bit on the big picture, if we can. And AMGC's got a roadmap for what globally competitive manufacturing, might look like for Australia in the future. And obviously, we're at a pivotal moment now in, how we're going to go about that going forward. It's been said, however, that Australia, as we know, it's been said it's the size of continental USA, but we've got the population of Madagascar, so it's there's a big disparity, if you like, in terms of the size of our country and our ability to mass produce things onshore cheaply and efficiently with the transport involved versus the size of our population, etc. And that's why, AMGC has been a big proponent of advanced manufacturing, and we're looking to move up the value curve in terms of what we're doing. But, with some of the discussions that are out there at the moment about Australia needing to seek further self-sufficiency in manufacturing, and bring more mass production of consumer goods back onshore, how do you see that? Do you see that as a viable option for us, or should we sort of continue to focus on some of the niche areas that we've had success in to date and maybe expand on those? Do you have a sort of a viewpoint on that?
Yeah, I do, and really involved with a couple of some fantastic companies right now. At AMGC, we've been able to back some world-class projects and co-fund industry to manufacture new products. And right now, there's a lot going on in the energy space. And I think if we can really look at energy and the costs around energy, if we can reduce those costs and inputs, and in central Queensland last week, I had a lot of conversations around the cost of electricity there locally. So we've got a few projects on the boil right now around energy, and you can have a look at those on our AMGC website on the projects tab. A couple that come to mind is a company called Energy Renaissance, and they're looking to establish their manufacturing facilities right now. So we're involved in those discussions for new ways of energy. Yesterday, I was talking with a team from Capricorn Power. So you might want to Google Capricorn. They're producing and manufacturing a waste heat to energy machine. So it's a fantastic bit of kit. And those sort of technologies can be manufactured here in Australia through collaborative partnerships. A great company in Geelong called Osteng are working with Capricorn Power to manufacture these, what's involving with the Barton engine for transferring heat into electricity. And so if we can do things around smart ways of looking at energy and green hydrogen, I've got several projects on the boil at the moment around producing green hydrogen to produce electricity for residential sites and for industrial sites. So across a range of new energy platforms that we can manufacture here in Australia, if we get that right, that's great for our local manufacturing base, but it's also technology and resources that we can export globally. So we can capture the value here locally and boost local jobs and raise the skill levels, raise the income, but also gain new markets offshore. Because again, I'd much rather see a global audience of 7 billion potential customers, in addition to, as you say, comparable to Madagascar here in Australia. We've got a great country. I'm really proud of our manufacturing community out there at the moment, now more than ever. There's some fantastic people doing some very clever things, and they're reaching out and working with the universities and some of our great researchers as well. So these collaborative partnerships we need to really build on. And so it's great to get out and try and break down these barriers, bring people together, make introductions between companies that didn't know each other before, but once they can pick up the phone and talk to each other or do a Zoom call, they're learning new ways of doing things. They're opening up new opportunities, and it doesn't have to be too difficult. So I'm happy to facilitate those sort of calls and interactions. If anyone's wanting some advice or guidance, just reach out.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm sure a number of people listening will hopefully take advantage of that. And please do reach out to any of us, and we'll put you in touch with Michael. And look, I think you touched on it there, the importance of having a highly skilled workforce, I suppose, in terms of this move up the value chain and having a high-tech manufacturing sector. Just want you to touch on briefly, Michael, if it's okay, what AMGC are doing along with the government to support modern manufacturing, training and increasing the high quality jobs out there for manufacturers.
Yeah, I mean, I often say it's not your grandfather's manufacturing anymore. We're not seeing the smokestacks and all the rest that used to go with it. So we need to put that message out there about advanced manufacturing and the current state of play here in Australia. If we want the next generation to get involved, we really need to be talking about it like we are now and raise that profile. And right now, everyone's talking about manufacturing, so that's a good thing. But at AMGC, we launched the Manufacturing Academy. It's its own platform at manufacturingacademy.org.au, and we're adding new content to that over the next couple of weeks. So I certainly encourage people to get on there. We were able to go out and interview our members all around Australia, and they're telling their story. There's about 4 hours of content on that platform where people can log in and learn about what people are doing right now to transform their business into being an advanced manufacturing firm. Things like smart sensing, robotics and automation, and upskilling their workforce. So that's a really good platform because we've got so much research on the AMGC website that anyone can download for free. We've got plenty of publications around what it means to be an advanced manufacturer. But on the Manufacturing Academy platform, this is business owners sharing their story. They're putting our research and their talents into action. I really recommend that site. So the skills uplift is coming. I've got some school students that I'll be talking to over the coming weeks about the current state of play in manufacturing, and encourage them to think outside the square and reach out to local businesses so they can get engaged now. We're seeing some great programs around the high schools where year 11 and 12 students are completing their HSC, but also working with local firms. So it's almost like an apprenticeship, if you like, but they both get to know each other. The skills are uplifted and they're getting a position at that local firm. So the ability to create local jobs in manufacturing is a sign that I'm really positive about.
Yeah, very important, and those are some great initiatives, and I think will be very helpful in creating some positive results in manufacturing jobs in the future. So, Thank you, Michael. And I think just want to move the discussion along, and I think we'll bring in Bill and David shortly. But before we do, I'm probably just going to jump into a polling question because I think it'll be interesting just to capture some thoughts of the audience around this question of reshoring and onshoring. So the question's up on your screen now. So in the last 6 months, have you or are you considering reorganizing your supply chain or production? So you should tick any of those that apply to you. Are you considering reshoring my manufacturing supply chain? Considering nearshoring my manufacturing supply chain? So looking at countries closer to home. Increase the number and location of your trading partners, maybe to address vulnerabilities in your supply chain. Are you looking at using best shoring, so a combination of on, off, and reshoring, or are you looking to expand globally? So you can tick more than one, tick any that apply. Be great to get some results out of this and see what that brings up. So just give you a few seconds to tick your answers, and then we'll close the poll in a few seconds' time and see what the results look like. All right, should we see if we can close it off? Here we go. Oh, we'll get the results up now. Okay. Oh, it's quite a mixture there. It's interesting. So yeah, so 40% of those who answered thinking about reshoring, which is great, or another 20% nearshoring. 40% thinking about increasing trading partners, and 40% a combination thereof. So I think there's some crossovers there, but there's some good numbers there. Michael, did you want to comment on some of those? It looks like there's a number of people considering making these changes. Is that consistent with what you're seeing out there in the market with the manufacturers you're visiting?
It's certainly an opportunity, isn't it? And I like the one about increasing the number and location of trading partners. I think that's important to consider as well. Another thing that happens, Ryan, is people are realizing more and more how strong our brand is. As Aussies, anywhere we go in the world, we're trusted. People just like listening to our accent for one, but they trust us as Australians. They also trust any products that come from Australia. So the opportunity to reshore your manufacturing and badge it as made in Australia seems to me to be a real opportunity to increase that value. If you can say this is made in Australia and export that, that's another consideration to put into the mix for reshoring and looking at that opportunity as well. We've got this fantastic brand, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so look, I think, Bill, if it's okay, I'll bring the discussion on to you, and you're welcome to comment on the poll results as well. But what I was looking for as well, Bill, was an overview of the current finance and policy around global trade and exports and how this impacts Australia. So, you know, something around your view of the global situation at the moment. How do you see things for the manufacturing industry here?
I think it's fair to say that global trade in general and as a subset, trade in manufactured items is choppy, Ryan. I think, I mean, everything that Michael said is correct, and the opportunities are there, and the tides, if you like, in the economy are ripe for all of these things. But we do need to be cognizant of the fact that out there, so to speak, there are a whole range of issues that really need to be considered carefully in terms of, I think, one of the poll result questions of the location and diversity of trading partners. For me, that's one of the key aspects, I suppose, of the trade question. And you know, if I cast my mind back to November, December last year, global trade had just recovered its values from pre-GFC times. So it had taken, you know, a good 9 years to recover. And I remember those times. That was supply chain disruption as well. You had the circumstance that for a few days, the whole shipping system was paused because of the inability of bills of lading and various other payment mechanisms to be recognised. So all kinds of shocks can impede at different times in history. Here and now we've got COVID. What has that thrown up? Well, once again, December 2019, World Trade Organization's alerting the world to the fact that the level of new trade barriers has increased for the first time since 2012. And the key sectors that were affected by it were machinery, electronic devices, all the kind of high value fabrication articles that in the main would naturally drive Australia's rebuilding of the manufacturing sector. So interestingly enough, precious metals and minerals as well in there. So from a perspective of where we were before we entered into these circumstances, it was a recovering market, but with greater risk and greater impediments that had to be overcome. So the proposition has not changed. Australia, you know, Australia was world renowned in the interwar period as a source of high quality manufactured goods, value-added agricultural products. The Sunshine Harvester factories in Sunshine in Melbourne were world leaders in technology. The same is true now, but the formations that produce those goods are different. I think you know, when I look at what are the ingredients for global trade, for a growth path for Australian manufacturing, I think about at a base level, the trained people that underpin the ideas and technology that goes into our manufacturing. Some would argue we already have that, but you know, the fact is, successful countries in manufacturing have lots and lots of engineers. They also have readily available financial structures and I suppose government policies that support them, which is something possibly David can speak about later. If I think of the other aspects, the quality of the trade relations at a global level are really important. So what do we see there? We see the World Trade Organization really stumbling and desperately trying to keep the global trading architecture in place. My personal view is that that won't go well. What will go well is in our choice of diverse and sustainable supply chains as pathways for Australian manufacturing exports. We look to regions, we look to a network of trade agreements as being a safer, more stable environment in which for Australian businesses to conduct trade. So that architecture, I think, now will serve us well. Arguably, previously, when the WTO was stronger, it wasn't quite as important. But I think now it's clear to me, at least for the next decade or so, until things settle down, that the clear choices need to be around our agreement-based relationships.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. And I suppose just building on some of those points there. So you've touched on the importance of agreements between nations, and what we've seen, a recent trend, even pre-COVID, was protectionist policies around the world. Other countries placing tariffs and restrictions on goods from other countries. Australia's been impacted by that to some degree. So I suppose, is there anything that you'd recommend that we should be doing as a nation in terms of our domestic policies to deal with those types of situations, and in order to keep free trade flowing? And secondly, should Australia be thinking about its own protectionist policies? Is that a route that we should be going down, or not? Is it the opposite that you think is important?
Well, I mean, the logical circumstance for the level playing field is that everything is level. Clearly, it's not. Australia took an economic theory view of tariff reductions over the periods of the Hawke and Keating governments. So that unilateral reduction in tariffs was based on the idea that that would naturally cause market forces to expose where we had competitive advantage. But as we've seen over time, the needs of society and the impacts of shocks of various types require us to look to our own capabilities in terms of things that possibly we're not the cheapest in the world. The problem with the dollar value measure of these things is that it doesn't characterise preferences and qualities. So would anybody suggest for a second that the Swiss economy is a cheap economy, producing cheap items? No, it doesn't. But it has an excellent brand. It has a reputation for producing very, very high quality machine goods that are prized throughout the world, and for their longevity and their outputs. The positioning of Australian manufacturing in these areas, I think, is key. What that does then is it immediately segments the markets that we should be looking at. So if I look at the recent elements of the Indonesia-Australia Economic Cooperation Partnership Agreement, it's clearly designed to integrate our economies better. And Australia is well placed in that instance to be a close, secure source of more elaborately transformed manufactures. Along that theme, Australia needs to remember the portfolio effect that is so characteristic of low-risk behaviours in finance and any other broad-based sector, and diversify our trading partners. We, at the moment, our statistics are horribly skewed one way, and that's North Asia. It needs to be different. And in finding different trading partners, we will find different niche markets for quality manufactured products from Australian businesses. We cannot rely on 2 or 3 economies to determine how we manufacture and what we manufacture. The fact is, there is a range of possibilities out there that we need to explore more fully.
Thank you, Bill. And I suppose just building on that a little bit further, many businesses in Australia, are SME-sized businesses. And have you got any advice for them around, how they can go on this growth path towards, getting more involved in the global picture, and, some of the things that you're talking about making the most of what we have here in Australia? Is there anything that you could talk about on that growth path for SMEs?
We obviously, you'd be aware, Ryan, that we've spent a lot of time examining the place of SMEs in international trade. My first point would be that most of the structures, most of the policy and agreement structures that are in place don't really envisage or seek to shape themselves around SME needs. What does that mean? It means that it's harder. It means that you need to make very carefully considered strategic decisions about what you sell, how you sell it, how you produce it. All of those things are fundamental. So my single message to SMEs considering exporting activities is that it is a strategic change of business type. You are changing yourself into a business that is oriented to offshore markets. It can't be the case that it's just a question of offloading the 2% that you can't sell domestically. There's a lot more to it than that. Obviously, the scale markets exist overseas. Are they better margins than in Australia? Are they better serviced by supply chains in Australia? Probably not. You go overseas for scale. You go overseas as an SME to get bigger. And it's the way that all nations have done it over time. But it needs to be carefully considered. And it can be extremely successful. I think the theory and case studies around it are excellent demonstrators of what is good practice and what is bad practice. So it's not insoluble, but it is a requirement that whoever owns or manages these businesses needs to take themselves out of the domestic market and understand the extra elements that they're adding.
Thank you. And Michael, David? Yeah, Michael, so you want to add something? I was going to see if anyone had something to add. Go ahead,
I would like
Michael.
to add to that because I think the technology has changed so much and the export opportunities have changed so much quickly too, because I know last time I talked about one of our members in Cairns, a company called Norweld. It might be good to put a couple of links here if we can. So Norweld have this fantastic Instagram feed that they developed just on a whim. One of the director's daughters was involved with doing Instagram, so Dad had to go. And just because of a few photographs, they now export their products to Saudi Arabia and the United States. Now, what they manufacture is ute trays for the back of Toyota Land Cruisers and things like that. So they're welding those and fabricating those ute trays and bits of equipment in Cairns, and now exporting outside of Australia just because of Instagram, which is completely free. So it's a whole new way of being an exporter. We have a company called Nevco in Western Sydney. They export trailers over to the United States, to places like Texas and other states in the US. And a fantastic company called Tradiebot Industries. And Tradiebot have developed new technology around virtual reality systems in the automotive sector. And during this last 16 weeks, during this crisis, they've established their US presence. So they're growing. But we've been able to connect these members so they can talk amongst each other and offer advice and support about the path they've already taken. So I strongly recommend people get professional advice, but also reach out through our networks, and we can make, join the dots, connect people to each other to, give a bit of a talk, a bit of discussion, even catch up over a coffee just to say, this is the hurdles that I had, this is how we overcome certain obstacles, but it's working. So I think, it doesn't have to be very difficult. I think a practical approach can work very well. And again, we're all here in this Zoom today to offer that support. I know that, so that's very good.
Yeah,
absolutely.
look, I'm not by any means downplaying the learning by doing, Michael, but I am a very keen advocate of formalising what you're doing and having it very clear in front of you what your costs are, what your relationships need to be, etc., etc. That's the good fallback. That's the tangible stuff that can be analysed for improvements or repair.
Ryan, I think it is
Absolutely.
worth of the points there that Bill and Michael have been making. So look, when we look at the income streams into manufacturing sector and industrial capability, one of the things we notice if we look against the US and the UK compared with Australia is that the margins are a lot lower in Australia. So some of the hypothesis, and you probably see this in some of the more successful companies, is things like what are manufacturers doing around innovation? What are manufacturers doing around being closer to their market and getting their product to market? And also, what are the services that need to sit alongside that? So intellectual property. So for a lot of manufacturers, what are they doing about having their own branding rather than white labeling? What are they doing around patents and trademarks? So what are they doing for that experience into the market they're doing so they can generate that higher margin? And we end up having that discussion as well in terms of when we talk about reshoring and we talk about size. So one of the challenges with reshoring, particularly when you're an exporter, is that you already have the issue that the market you're looking at is most likely considerably larger than the market that you're already playing in. You're probably already bringing sourcing product offshore just to meet the demands that you have in terms of your existing market. To then think that you are going to be exporting product and you're going to onshore your supply chains is probably a leap too far in terms of risk, and obviously that's what a lot of people have been grappling with at the moment. And I think also the point Michael was making earlier when he's mentioning a lot of the opportunities he's chatting about is if we go back 20, 30 years where we had large diversified manufacturers, I don't think that is the path for Australia. That specialty, that innovation, that being close and understanding the market that you're supplying into, I think that is the secret of success for Australia, that ability to adapt your products and adapt your services quickly and understand where you're applying that. Those are the companies that are going to be successful, those that can engage. Those companies that think that they're going to sit back in the supply chain, white label and just supply through, I don't see that as the secret for Australia.
Thank you, David. Yeah, some great points there. And I think, you know, some interesting ones probably to pick up on. And we had an audience question actually that came through just now that I think touches on this as well. So you mentioned there about, you know, the secret of success perhaps for Australia, you know, is more, you know, focused on the SME side of things, you know, businesses focusing on what they do well, being, you know, focused on one particular area perhaps, rather than being a large conglomerate, diversified manufacturer. With that in mind, what are you seeing then in the M&A side of things? Is there much M&A activity, you know, I guess pre or post-COVID for manufacturing? Or is that a route that we shouldn't be going down?
For the industry, when we're running sale processes, we see for good businesses, and particularly good businesses with good IP, we see a lot of offshore interest. So when we say about what is the impact for M&A in COVID at the moment, one of the impacts is, although it's very easy to get interest from overseas, and it's easy enough to remotely do financial due diligence when it comes down to meeting management teams, having a look at facilities, doing commercial DD, that's extremely difficult, if not virtually impossible at the moment. So that's certainly slowing down our M&A activity. Likewise on that, obviously there's been the changes around FIRB for foreign investment. So basically any deal we're putting up of any size that has foreign involvement in it, there's a slow there of at least a couple of weeks, and probably a couple of months would be more like the experience. So that's making it hard. But I think that's also reflective of the case that not enough of SME innovation and SME commercialised product is being acquired by large Australian businesses. Too much of it just goes offshore. Likewise, we end up at the issue before that, where if we talk about pre-commercialisation, and so the development that goes on into research, the wonderful institutions we have here in terms of developing product and new technologies, again, for us, when we're looking transactions, we would see a lot of that going offshore. I think there's been a lot of resistance to companies doing growth through small acquisition and SME acquisition. When we look at multiples that are paid, the multiples that are paid for SME businesses are much smaller. So there is a significant opportunity domestically to do bulk togethers of SMEs, and obviously there's there's private equity plays around that, but I think just for businesses sitting in their own market, they're probably not putting enough time into looking at growth through acquisition.
That's interesting. And I suppose in terms of that, is there any particular sectors, subsectors of manufacturing that you're seeing more activity in than others, either globally or locally on the M&A side, or is it pretty much across the board quite difficult right now?
Oh, look, right at the moment it is quite difficult. Obviously, the Pratt family pulled off a wonderful transaction, so that's great for Australia, and brought that ownership on board. So fantastic there. Sadly, we didn't do that deal out of BDO, but all good for Australia. But look, there is still a lot of discussion going on. There are still a lot of approaches. Again, when I talk about private equity, both in Australia and offshore, there was that 4-week period through March, April, where I think PE spent a lot of time really looking at their own book and in-house around where their businesses stood in relation to COVID. But the discussion prior to that was that there is an enormous amount of funding that's sitting within private equity that's not been applied. They're still looking for good targets and good tuck-ins. And certainly of the last 6 to 8 weeks, that's certainly been the case, where those conversations are continuing again. But again, that's at that professional investing side. I still reiterate the point for those businesses that are listening today is, have you thought around, well, what could be achieved through acquisition? What could be achieved in terms of bringing that growth? Because often those tuck-ins, the value is not going to be there for the larger institutions or private equity, because they may well be too small, and therefore the prices achieved in the marketplace will be a lot lower. So I think some more thought around that would be useful.
Thanks, David. Sorry?
A huge untapped opportunity there.
Absolutely. And I suppose, again, just something you mentioned there, and in terms of a post-COVID world, and obviously once incentives drop off in terms of JobKeeper, etc., times are going to get tougher. Do you think there'll be a pickup in terms of mergers in the market of businesses that, sort of building their scale and size to survive in this environment? Or, do you think we'll still see growth through, those bolt-on acquisitions that you're talking about?
So I still think it's more likely to be the bolt-on acquisitions. Most of the survival discussions that we end up in, if the business has got to the point where it's having issues around survival, they're probably not at a point where the business is organised to go through a sale process, and that requires some work and some structuring to do that. So often those calls come too late. I think for a business, though, that is running a good process, that understands what they should look like to run a sale process and is geared up to do that, those opportunities are there. And certainly I would expect to see opportunity around that. The other comment earlier, Bill was talking in terms of SME and opportunities. I think the opportunities in terms of government interaction offshore, and how that is difficult for SME to tap into that. I think in terms of capital, we have the same issue for SME in Australia, where for those businesses that are talking about less than $20 million worth of debt, it's fairly difficult for them to have growth discussions with their bank around raising that if they don't have property backing for that. It still seems that our banking system is far too reliant upon lending against hard assets and property, rather than good businesses, good people, good teams that have a good strategy to enter markets. Obviously, once we start getting up into the large corporates and large borrowings, and we're talking to corporate and institutional lending, they have the skills at that point to do that. But for the SMEs, I think that's really challenging. And in Australia, where we don't have anywhere near as developed the capital markets for that innovation and growth around that. I think that's a big challenge. The fact now that we're starting to see private debt as an offering for SMEs, I think also reflects on how the banking sector has not been supportive of SME. Mind you, on the other side, when you get into international transactions, the banks are well regarded internationally. So when we start talking about bills of lading, letters of credit, and those likes, the major banks are all well recognised. They all have solid skills in those areas, and certainly that's not an impingement for our SMEs that are looking to go offshore.
If I may just comment on that, I think David is absolutely spot on in terms of the paucity of options for business lending at the SME level. I was about to say 19th century. It's 20th century in its thinking. Although I would argue that as a participant in international trade, I think the banks have, a lot of them at least, have fallen by the wayside in terms of their efficiencies and risk mitigation. So I think we do need alternatives there. The point I'd like to make, though, in Australia is that we have institutional limits to growth. If you consider the impact of ACCC market competition rules in a small market, we have an immediate break on the ability of local firms to amass scale in the domestic market. So it's detrimental, I think, to building the kinds of internalised intellectual property, financial reserves, and everything else that other firms in other countries have used as a springboard to become successful global traders. You just tally up the number of goods-based companies that are global and have their headquarters in Australia. There aren't many of them. So there are definitely policy and institutional reforms that would make that would support manufacturing in ways that don't even necessarily look at the ideas of tariffs or trade barriers and things like that. It's just freeing up the system to make it easier for them to get big, smart, and wealthy.
Thank you, Bill. Some great points there. And David, just before we move along the discussion, I just wanted to pick up on something that you mentioned around, for exporters, looking at onshoring, might not be something that they might consider in terms of risk appetite at the moment due to, the risk of doing that. Are you seeing any trends out there in terms of companies, though, looking to diversify the suppliers that they're dealing with in terms of outsourced manufacturing? So, for example, moving out of China to other countries, such as Vietnam, Indonesia, or India, or any other sort of things along of that nature?
So absolutely, we've had a lot of those discussions in terms of that integrity of supply. The very challenging thing, though, has been you realise how few choices there are in a lot of these opportunities. So it's not like you can simply just go out and there are 4 or 5 suppliers just sitting there that can supply the product that you want in the spec that you want and bring that on automatically. So what we've got clients doing now is initiating those discussions with alternate suppliers, but often what that means is they're going to have to split up their supply chain around products to get that spread, because when you're talking about providing product that's niche to the market that you're going into, often the inputs that you're also looking for then become niche to your product. So you can't have a supply chain sitting there on hold just in case. So you then run into the issue, well, if I'm going to start splitting up supply on these products, what does that mean in terms of my pricing and how that flows through? Likewise for geographic's been very hard at the moment because the logistics has been so inconsistent internationally. So as much as we've talked about moving supply out of China, obviously there was a lot of stop initially out of China, but even now the logistics into Asia is probably not too bad. Logistics out of the US is still pretty poor. Canada's hopeless. So the logistics chains and what's going on at the moment is also making that discussion extremely difficult.
Okay, thank you, David.
I've got to say though, how soon we forget the businesses that entered China in the 80s to chase cheap production and larger markets went through decades of agony and no returns and all kinds of difficulties. I mean, you know, when I think of the alternatives and the timescales now that are available to making these changes, you know, it's relatively nothing in comparison with those original setups. Having said that, fully accept that if you spent 30 years working with a handful of manufacturers who have progressively tailored what they do, or you've tailored your product to what they do in order to put it in the marketplace, then yes, you've almost certainly forgotten about intellectual property rights and molds and things that you can physically take somewhere else and say, here you are, start making this. Having said that, you know, if I think about Vietnam, the free trade zone system there is probably one of the better ones in the region to facilitate under bond manufacturing and things like that, which have all kinds of benefits in countries that have currency controls, etc. So, you know, there are pros and cons. And is anybody suggesting that it's not going to be painful? I don't think so. But the consequences of not doing it, we're beginning to see, and they could be substantial and detrimental.
And the other comment in terms of market size and something that people might well have heard me harp on before is government procurement. So for a lot of people in their marketplaces, by the time you look at the tiers of government, they would be a large customer. Michael spoke earlier about ventilators. So, you know, we don't have ventilators being produced in Australia, but the moment that the government points at a few industries and goes, oh, well, we would like some ventilators, well, industry can work out how to put them together and source them. What the government has been, in my mind, very poor at doing is sourcing Australian product. Mind you, they'll say they will, but I don't hold to that. And certainly they've used the excuse of, oh, well, those aren't made in Australia, but, you know, are they looking at aligned manufacturers that are in Australia that go, okay, we see that you're making this product, can you make something for us that looks slightly similar with some lead time and all of those sorts of things? It also then allows those companies to have that scale up in the domestic marketplace with the government. And again, the government as a good customer, I'm not saying the government just buys whatever because it's Australia. I say that the government be a good customer that demands good products that are of international standard, but allows the base to grow to make it easier then to look at export and offshoring. So I think the government procurement thing is still a huge opportunity in Australia. And I think at all of the tiers, it's being done relatively poorly.
Mm. Yeah, look, some important comments there. Go on, sorry, Bill.
I was just going to make a comment. I think the truth is that some of those capabilities to make procurement exclusive have been signed away, unfortunately, with a lot of our agreements. Your point is absolutely right that what could be better than having, if you like, at least survival levels of volumes being sought by our own governments, but the agreements that we've signed have made that a lot more complicated.
Okay, and look, I think that there's another question I think that's linked to that I might get a comment on from each of you, and Michael, feel free to sort of touch on some of the comments that David and Bill made there as well. But what do you each see as the most important role then as of the three tiers of government in assisting manufacturers with their ability to onshore manufacturing as a result of COVID-19? So this was an audience question that we had come through, which I think is quite pertinent to that discussion. Michael, did you want to go first on that? Or?
I think, yeah, I agree. All levels of government have a role to play here. Certainly, they're big customers for one. And you see local government procurement in particular can play a role with local councils. You saw the federal government 2 weeks ago announce the massive recycling modernisation fund, some 190 million from the federal government, which will be matched by others around the country, which will end up being around $1 billion initiative around the circular economy. So that's from the federal government, but at a local level, this is, every council has their own garbage tips. So just one example there is around that circular economy and the recycling initiatives. There's technology being developed here in Australia from our great manufacturers to use such things as electronic waste to recycle that into 3D filaments. So we can potentially have manufacturing at every council garbage tip using this new microfactory technology. So local jobs across all of Australia in the regions as well. World's first technology developed and designed here in Australia to develop supply chains out of recycled waste streams that we can manufacture new products and export to the world. So yes, government does have a role to play. We are seeing funding announcements, and I'm sure there's going to be more to come. But I do agree with the other speakers that every level of government has a role to play here. I think very quickly we're going to see various state governments make announcements around manufacturing. We saw the New South Wales government this week announce an initiative around skills. So that's been good, and I'm sure there's many more to come. In the theme of reshoring that we're talking about today, we've got 47,000 manufacturers across the nation, and so they've all been able to assist in various ways. But if I just focused on the face masks, we only had that one company in Shepparton before the COVID crisis that were manufacturing face masks. We now have several manufacturers around the country producing medical grade face masks, but we also have companies being part of that local supply chain. So up until this recent times, we've been importing the fabrics and materials to do such things as face masks. But now we have companies reaching out to us and we're supporting them around manufacturing those fabrics here in Australia. And there's a special material called melt blown, and that can be used for the face mask, but also can be used for packaging materials and other things like that. So here's a reshoring example to fulfill the current crisis, but can then go on and grow these companies to supply our local supply chains and develop, again, world's best products that we can export. So it's there's a lot going on in the last 16 weeks, that's for sure, Ryan, but it's also creating a lot of opportunities and connections that didn't exist before. And I think this all bodes very well for our manufacturing sector, what we actually call our nation's manufacturing capability, and it's proving resilient.
I think at a federal level, the two that manufacturing would have been waiting for is the decade wait around industrial relations and productivity. So the discussion that's never been held and doesn't look like it's going to be held. So that would be one. And the second one would be the discussion around energy. Of course, we're in this sort of no man's land at the moment as our energy industry transforms. And what that has meant is that the cost of energy in Australia is extremely world uncompetitive. Anything that we can do to speed that up would assist, and certainly there are policy decisions that are in place around how generators interact with the grid, and there needs to be a significant discussion around that. So, the technology exists, the investment exists around energy, but the process and policy that's in place is not conducive to that technology in terms of energy feeding to manufacturers.
Thanks, David. And Bill,
one
last comment. Right. Oh, sorry, on Michael.
Just wanted to raise with David, absolutely right about electricity costs in particular. I know we're talking about other energy as well, but the members tell me, wherever I am in the country, that electricity prices are certainly an issue. And you think about Australia, we should have the cheapest and most reliable energy in the world. But I would encourage people to get on board AMGC. Membership is free, but that then you'll get our newsletters. And our latest news is coming out next week, which will publish some great stories around energy projects that we've got going on. And people are listening, people are adapting. This new technology is coming, but I strongly do agree with David that there's policy changes that need to happen too for electricity, for me in particular.
Thank you. Bill, one last comment from you. We're almost out of time, unfortunately.
Oh, but, the list is endless, but the colleagues have mentioned a lot of the best of them. I've got to say the business regulation and supply chain regulation are drag chains on growth paths for manufacturing. There's no doubt in my mind about that. I've mentioned competition policy. The World Bank demonstrates that it's 5 times more expensive and time-consuming for an Australian exporter to get goods out of this country than it is in Canada. Those kinds of measures can't be sustained going forward if we entertain the idea of selling more than wheat, iron ore, and beef offshore. The other thing I'd like to say is the big gap, to my mind, in if you like, inputs or precursors to manufacturing is that our material processing side of our economy is very, very weak. So when I think of mineral sands coming out of northwest Victoria, I'm thinking, why haven't we got titanium processing that feeds into the space and defence and high-tech medical equipment industries that these would be natural inputs to? Similarly, we've never made a computer chip in the place, and all our initiatives around ICT and water and various other things are all computer based. So a couple of fundamental startups that would produce modern materials for modern applications, I think, would give the great ideas out there a good boost.
Great, thank you, Bill. And look, unfortunately, we've run out of time. So look, it was a great discussion today, and I'd like to thank you all, Michael, Bill, and David, for your valued insights. I'm sure everyone listening will agree that it was a great session today. So please do feel free to reach out to us if you've got any questions about what we've discussed on this one or any of the previous webinars that we've done as well. And exciting announcement as well to make is that given the success that we've had so far with this series, we've decided to continue on. And so we will have another one in a couple of weeks' time. It's up on the screen there now, on Wednesday the 19th. Discussing some of the big themes in manufacturing, and the next one's going to be on the circular economy and how this relates to manufacturing. And so, yeah, very exciting. And Michael, you'll be joining us again for that. So looking forward to that. And we'll have some more speakers, yeah, for that one as well. So before we close the session, just to quickly mention, we have a short feedback survey that will launch once we close the webinar. We'd really appreciate if you could quickly fill that out for us, as it does give us some great insights into how we can plan the future sessions. And once again, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we do hope that you can join us again on our next webinar. So thank you everybody, and goodbye.